What is going on, people? It's your boy Isaiah coming back at you with another video. If I sound congested during this video, I do apologize. Sinuses have been killing me lately, temperature change and all that stuff, as far as, if you hear me breathing. But I did want to get this video out. I wanted to give my opinion as objectively as possible, which isn't possible in this case, on this pad. And give you my honest thoughts on it, and go from there. As far as a rating goes, the short story, I give it about a 5 out of 10, and I would not recommend it for most people. So with that being said, let's get into the positives and negatives. We'll start with the positives because we can get those out quicker, and the negatives will take a little while. So without further ado, what are the positives of this pad? The positives of this pad: the analog is in a comfortable position. You have the 6-button layout with the option to switch these shoulder buttons to this side. So you have your 3 punches, 3 kicks, and your light, mediums, and heavies all accessible with one hand. That is supposed to, in theory, help you with your gameplay, since you should only be focusing this hand on the directional inputs and your other right hand on all your punches and kicks. So that is the positives of this pad, and also that it is wired, so you in theory also have maximum response time. So yeah, ergonomically the analog stick is in a good place, and you have that layout that is supposed to be helpful, and it is not a super heavy pad also, and it is compatible with PS3 and PS4. So yeah, that is about it. So let's go ahead and get into the negatives of this pad. And the negatives are mainly revolving around the ergonomic of the pad, the ergonomics, and when it comes to the directional pad, and also the directional pad itself. So when it comes to the ergonomics, you heard me mention that your thumb sits comfortably, naturally on the analog stick. It does not sit comfortably on the directional pad. So because of that, instead of playing like this, like in comparison with my Hori Fighting Commander, which I do not have unfortunately with me, I ended up throwing it out because it was crapping out on me, and it was just over time usage. And yeah, your thumb wants to sit comfortably when you grab the controller like this. This is not being forced. So with the analog, you are perfectly fine. You aren't really far off. So, but with this, because first of all, you have to move your thumb over here. And given that nobody plays like this, no, if you play like that, you're weird. All right, you play like this. This is how your thumb is inputting everything on the controller. So given that your hand has to move to the side, and then you can input your inputs on this D-pad effectively. But because of that, since your hand is like this, you are actually impinging on this joint, which I noticed after playing for hours, it kept hurting more and more, this joint of my thumb. That is not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. So the other part of this D-pad is that when you are playing on it, you have to move the entire damn directional pad whenever you are inputting anything. That is that thing is pretty deep. You can kind of tell. It's kind of hard to tell, but you can see it's a pretty damn deep disc. That is a considerable amount of mass to be having to move for something that is supposed to be so fluid. And so I found this was actually causing a lot of fatigue for me. And I found that for some reason, even though to the touch, this feels like it's smooth plastic, in actuality, I found there was a lot of friction given how I had to move the entire directional pad, all that mass, anytime I wanted to do anything. paired alongside with the fact that my hand is like this, so I'm really like digging into this directional pad to input everything. It is one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever had to deal with a controller to date. To date. So the ergonomics of this directional pad actually suck ass. Okay, they are terrible, terrible. Okay, and unless you have little fingers, which I have an average sized hand, unless you have little fingers, you are not going to be comfortable. Unless your hand sits directly like this, you are not going to be comfortable using this pad. Okay, that is probably the worst thing about this pad. But let's go on to the other side of the controller and talk about that some. So I told you in theory, the 6-button layout is actually supposed to be a good thing. Well, in comparison to the Hori Fighting Commander, the regular Hori Fighting Commander, which is the one I used, I've never tried the other one. These buttons are actually considerably smaller. They are considerably smaller, which makes it so hitting 2 by accident is actually very likely, and it happens more often than I would like. So that is very bad, because that will literally cost you matches, especially when you are playing at higher levels. A single error can change the momentum in this game. And on top of that, these shoulder buttons. First off, the shapes of them are just stupid. Okay, you have one really wide one, and then you have one that's really narrow, that's a trigger form, and one that's flat face. Okay, and I found that this one tends to get stuck sometimes, in terms of, sometimes you might be resting your hand right there, and, you might by accident hit it with like this side of your finger, and then, you try to press it again. Can you hear anything? No, because this side of my finger actually pressed against it before I actually wanted to press it, so, bah, bah. So you have to be very intentional with the way you press this button, because if you accidentally go like that, you pressed it before you wanted to. And then on top of that, a trigger button is never good. The latency, which is a recovery on the button. Sorry, it's getting kind of... The recovery on the button is very stupid. Very stupid for a fighting game. And the other thing that drove me nuts is the proximity of these two buttons to each other. So, look how close my fingers are. Tell me that is not a recipe for hitting either or button whenever I don't want to. Because of that, ideally you would want your fingers ready to go. With the Hori Fighting Commander, I could place my fingers right there, and I actually had some space like that. And so it wouldn't be an issue of hitting the other button by accident. But with this controller, it has happened where I've accidentally, because if your hand is right there, you can accidentally hit the trigger button. Piece of crap. Piece of crap. That is not ideal for hand positioning, okay? There should have been some space between those two buttons. So you can see overall, there are not a lot of positives for this controller. I will say there are some people who play on this controller who actually do like it. But I would venture to say if you enjoy this controller, you probably play on the analog stick. And if you don't, well, then you have some sort of probably deformed hand. But as far as this controller goes, given the ergonomics of this and the mass of this disc, which in theory is supposed to be the better design for fluidity of inputs, but is actually very counterintuitive given its position and how much you have to move to input anything on this pad. It is actually extremely uncomfortable, and it is fatiguing and painful to play on this. And the sizing of these buttons and the placement of the shoulder buttons and the proximity of them are actually not ideal, not optimal, especially when you compare it to something like the Hori Fighting Commander, which has bigger face buttons. These are both flat, and they have a space between them, unlike this. So overall, this pad is not something I would recommend for most people. There are like I said, if you play on analog, you might like it, but this, I would venture to say, most people will actually end up hating this. Okay, most people will actually end up hating this directional pad. I bought this pad because I wanted to try something new and see how I fared with it, and I absolutely hated it. If you can see right there, there's a couple marks on it, and you can probably guess from where those marks are, because I threw the damn thing on the floor because it was pissing me off so much. But yeah, that is the Madcatz Street Fighter 5 pad. Piece of crap. It sucks. I want to break it again. And it's not broken right now, but I want to chuck it on the floor because it was causing me a lot of issues in my gameplay. And I need to calm down. But yeah, overall, like I said, 5 out of 10. The only reason it gets a 5 out of 10 is because of analog and also the concept of the 6-button layout, which in general you already have an advantage if you have that sort of layout in terms of accessibility for your inputs and ease of access. So yeah, that is that, guys. My review on the Madcatz Street Fighter 5 pad. The Hori Fighting Commander is way better, even though it has a cross-shaped D-pad. The cross-shaped D-pad on the Hori Fighting Commander sits basically where your hand sits, like that. It'll be right in this position, and you can input your directional inputs very cleanly and easily. And yeah, it's much better than this pad. So that's the one I would go with. That's the one I would recommend. Unfortunately, I don't have a direct comparison video for you guys. But that is that. It's 11 minutes long. It's going a little long. Let me know what you think about this pad if you use it. Let me know what you play on. If you play on a pad, what kind of pad you play on, and how do you like it, and how have you compared it to other pads that you have also tried. So until next time, y'all, I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a good one.